coming, everyone. Thank you to Cheryl for lending us your lovely office space. We'll make sure we clean up the croissant crumbs afterwards. So my name is Rosie. I'm the brand and marketing exec at the Rec Hub. If you've not heard of the Rec Hub, you have got a little black flyer that you can have a look at, some information about what it is that we do. First of all, I'm just going to cover a couple of things before I hand over to our guests to introduce themselves. First of all, if you're wondering why this mic's not making my voice any louder, it's actually just recording the audio as opposed to amplifying us, because we're actually filming or recording today's session for our podcast, the Powered by People podcast. Again, if you've not heard of that, it's on the other side of your black flyer, so you can scan the QR code, check out our other episodes, and then keep an eye out for when this one goes live in a couple of weeks' time. So if I hand over if anyone's got any questions, please raise your hands and we can capture those during the session as opposed to having a Q&A at the end. My glamorous assistant Ben here is going to come round with another mic just so we can capture those questions for audio purposes for our listeners. So let me hand over to Cheryl. Do you want to introduce yourself first to everybody?
I actually know quite a few people here already, so lovely to see you, but also some new faces, so nice to meet everyone as well. So I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition here at Tide. I've been here 6 months. I just passed my probation, so I'm here to stay, which is good because I'm really happy here, really enjoying it. And I've, like most people, fell into recruitment, worked at agencies for about 5 years before sort of moving in-house. And eventually ended up at Microsoft, and then can someone get the door?
Yeah.
Sorry. And then Meta, where I met some of the lovely people here. And then I spent the last 3 years at a scale-up, tech scale-up called Bolt, leading the TA team there. And very happy to be here and meet everyone.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Sure. Hi, everyone. There's some familiar faces here for those that don't. Hello. Lovely to meet you. So, Rachel, I'm the Group Head of Talent Acquisition at IG. Day 10 officially. So I've literally just joined the wonderful world of fintech. But by way of background, I've been in talent acquisition for far too many years, a little bit over 20. My career started here in London. It's predominantly financial services and FTSE 100 companies. Started in London, went to Hong Kong for a year. My family still laugh about that because it took me 10 years to get back. So I went to Hong Kong, ended up in Australia, then up to Singapore. I've worked in Japan, I've worked in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, came back to the UK, and all of that was big bulge back bracket investment banking, lots of transformation programs. Made an active decision to work in smaller organizations when I came back to the UK. So worked for TPI Cap, which when I say it was worse than the Wolf of Wall Street, I really mean it. It was a fantastic opportunity as a TA leader to take an organization that had been doing the same thing for 50 years and really kind of turn it on its head. And then since then, I've worked for a couple of big FTSE 100s doing some very specific projects in the TA space. Just come out of Ricardo, which is a wonderful professional services firm, very much looking at the clean energy space, which was something completely new to a kind of banking financial services stalwart. And it was incredible to work in an organization whereby your talent pool was literally 20 people in the world that could do a job, and every job that we hired was that. And it really kind of took some different thinking as a TA leader. That organization was sold, hence why I've now landed at IG. And again, it's a company that's about to go through exponential growth and needs a little bit of help. So that's why I'm there. Lovely to meet you all.
So thanks, guys. So obviously you've both worked in high growth environments, as you've just mentioned, some big names there. So how has that affected the way you shape your team structure? Rachel, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. I've worked in organizations where I've had, in a high growth environment, where I've had teams of 45 plus down to 15 to 20. And I think there's probably, there's two parts to this answer. One is the understanding of your business and what high growth actually means for them. And I'll always kind of push back onto the business. Talk to me about your strategic workforce planning. talk to me about what your business's strategy is, because high growth can mean so many things. I think also in the TA landscape, and I'm sure that everyone sitting in this room will have seen and felt it, I feel like we're going through a shift anyway. And we've gone from being organizations where we've got high growth, and that basically equates to I need lots of people, I need a big TA team. And what we didn't really talk about, and certainly in some of my roles that are, back in the past, is we were very rigid. High growth equates to I need 40 recruiters in my team. And now I think, certainly where I've been at in the last couple of roles, is really thinking about where is that high growth? When is it required? And what happens when you go through the ebbs and flows of an organization? So my team needs to be flexible and it needs to be nimble. And so I think as a TA leader for me, um, I've shifted my mindset in terms of what I needed back in the day to what we need now. And I think also that ties in quite nicely with the landscape of work anyway. I think we've all fundamentally shifted in how we do our work, where we do it, and when we do it. And I think that's played into that type of environment quite nicely.
Cheryl, anything you want?
Yeah, I think there's a kind of traditional way of doing this where you look at building an intelligent capacity model, right? And you base it on what's the productivity per recruiter. And I've got teams that are doing really high volume, sort of lower level. I've even led like blue collar hiring in the past where, a recruiter might be able to close 20 positions in a month versus exec recruiters who are closing one position every 2 months, and tech maybe 3 positions, 4 positions a month, whatever it may be. So you build this kind of slightly flexible but pretty robust capacity model, and you really think about what's the size of the team that I need to meet the headcount demand. The problem that I've experienced with that is the headcount demand is never what it sets out to be. It always changes. Typically, it tends to be higher, but there are cases where a business strategy changes and the headcount becomes lower. Those times, I think there's opportunity then to start looking at projects and those things that you don't often have time to sit back and do, like how do we get more efficient? How do we build this process or whatever? So I think that's the kind of traditional way of doing it, and that does work to an extent. But what I have found for probably the last 3-4 years is that flexibility piece, right? So first of all, I know with Tide here, our headcount growth that we've got is we're probably looking to grow we're growing the business by about 50%, as in our revenue, our annual run rate, and our EBITDA. That's our goal. With that, we'll probably grow the company about 30%, which is amazing. It is a high growth environment. It's an incredible environment to be in. But I also know that through our budgeting process at the moment, we're trying to push back on some headcount and say, well, how do we do more with the same, or how do we leverage AI to automate things so we don't need to grow the headcount and therefore the overhead so much. So I know that what headcount lands, it will go up, but I don't know by how much. I don't know where it's going to increase. We have different operating models and across different business units within the organization. So I don't know, is our India business going to grow, twice as more as what we expect, or is some genius in our product team going to come up with a new idea and we have to add 3 engineering teams or 4 engineering teams or whatever? So that's where I think flexibility comes in, and this RPO, this embedded talent model really, really works, because if you build your capacity at like 80% of what you think you're going to need with your FTEs, your permanent staff, and then you bake in 20-30% of flexible capacity on top of that, the business likes it. My CFO likes it because it's not fixed. It's not fixed overheads, right? It's interim, and actually, it's not really more expensive than hiring. When you think about the impact of hiring someone, onboarding them, getting them productive, it's a 3 to 6 month process. Whereas you can get, a talent team in that has done it 50 times before and they know how to hit the ground running. So that's where I think that the best piece comes in around the flexibility and being able to scale up and down as you need to.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk a little bit about red flags, warning signs, conversations that you might hear on the ground or not that make you think, okay, it's time to start planning for change. What would that look like? Cheryl, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, I think if FP&A and finance are in the office a lot more, there's probably a slight warning sign there around budgets. I don't know. I think a lot of it can be a bit of gut feel and what you're hearing on the ground as well. Like during my time at Meta, which was an incredible journey and brilliant experience, I learned so much there and grew into a leader there as well. Um, Towards the end, I knew that there was change was coming. We'd announced the metaverse and, you know, there were rumblings within the business, and I can't quite put my finger on one thing and say, oh, it's this that made me think, uh-oh. Um, I just felt it. There were conversations that were happening around budgets and things that had never happened before. And there were things that started changing, like less snacks in the kitchen. So it were just little things that you kind of picked up on, and I felt that a change was coming there, and I also felt after 5 years it was time for me to move on to something else. So yeah, I don't know. For me, it's always been gut feel, but I think having the right stakeholders that you're connected to that value what you're delivering as a TA function and being able to stay close to them and how the business is shifting and asking the direct questions, what's happening in your org at the moment, what's on the horizon, what's the next 12 to 24 months look like. Having those open questions is probably the best way to get the direct and real answers.
It's all part of that, I suppose, having that seat at the table and being part of those conversations before, it all goes wrong, right? Rachel, what about for you? Any red flags?
I don't know if you'd call them red flags, but for me, it's when my CEO starts getting very interested in what I'm up to. And you get and I agree with Shell, by the way, you have a gut feel, and this is your measure as a TA leader. How close are you to your business? And how regular are the conversations that you're having, and it's that depth of strategic partnership that you've got. But for me, it's CEO, exec, and as soon as certain questions are asked to me around, could I just have this? Could you just run a quick report? I just want to see. And it's those pertinent questions that are coming in. So that for me probably puts me on high alert. I mean, it's like we said, companies grow, that all sorts of things happen, but it's when the senior guys are taking a real kind of keen interest in what you're doing. And then I think other pieces for me. So let's go back to data, looking at where hiring is starting to, where in the process have we now got pauses? Looking at particular areas where they may have raised, a number of requisitions and suddenly there's no movement, or can you hold this? To Cheryl's point as well, budgets. Every organisation will have we're coming into our financial year. We've done a budget plan for the year. This is it. Rachel, you're accountable for this amount of money. And then suddenly I'm having a conversation with my CFO to revisit in finite detail what it is we're spending. Or I love this ask of you need to give me a percentage of the budget back. So it's, those are just a couple of things where I think, okay, something's happening.
Once you get those feelings, or you think, right, stuff's about to change here, how do you decide what to pause or protect, whether that's teams, roles, projects? How do you do that?
So I think TA has, for many years, and I hate this as a TA leader, it's always been the parts of HR in an organisation where we hit challenging times. We're not recruiting, therefore that means talent acquisition people must go. And we've all seen it. It's, the market's up and down, up and down, up and down. And that is absolutely the worst thing to do. Because whilst we're there to deliver a service to the business, it's that wider piece, which is the continual talent pipelining. So I've always been a huge advocate for not just turning the tap off, because at some point this company's going to come through it. They're going to need us again. And from a financial, but purely fiscal perspective, it's a very silly idea to do it. So for me, and I've just come out of an organisation where actually we did have this. We were in the process of being acquired, and we had to be incredibly considered about how we were spending our money. It was going back and revisiting those strategic priorities that we had set as an HR function, and then looking at talent acquisition and saying, this is what we said we were going to deliver in year 1, year 2, and year 3 of our transformation program, working alongside finance in terms of what was the money that was allocated to those particular projects, what's going to have the biggest impact, but which we can still do within our fiscal constraints, and what do we need to really pause on. And again, coming back to your understanding of your business and what the business is doing. So, for example, a company that was being acquired, it made sense to me that we paused our employer branding piece, because actually we were going to fundamentally change as an organisation. So that's something that's put aside. I think the other thing that you've got to consider in this as well, though, is when you're pausing all of these projects, then what are your recruiters doing? So when you're going to the exec and saying, we're not taking headcount out, they'd still need to be doing something. And I think there's a wider piece in here, actually, across HR, thinking about internal mobility. What can my team be doing? We talk all the time, don't we, at the moment, about AI coming in. It's going to take out part of TA. I mean, that's a conversation for another time. But what are we doing actually to upskill and reskill and really kind of broaden TA's capabilities so that they can be put into other parts of the organisation when it's required?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And actually, in my previous role, when we had to reduce the size of the TA team, obviously we then had to rehire 6 months later, which typically happens. But when we did have to do that, we were actually really fortunate that we were able to we didn't actually lay anyone off. We redeployed them into other HR functions, so people operations, to learning and development, talent management, etc. So yeah, layoffs in general is something that nobody wants to do it, right? Nobody enjoys it. Sometimes there is a genuine need, and you have to, but typically, if it can be avoided through redeployment and internal mobility and stuff, then I'd always opt for that. I think for me, there's recruitment is a transactional role, right? And there's never free time. If I ask my recruit, and I'm having to do this at the moment, I'm having to ask my team, to dig deeper and to push, because we have a really smart budgeting process here at Tide, where we do quarterly reviews. But our product and engineering team are building a lot of new products next year, which is really, really connected to our revenue and our profits. So we have to launch these products, we have to get them off the ground, and we have to do it quickly. Otherwise, we're not going to realize the revenue that we need to hit our targets. And bonuses are connected to company performance as well as individual performance. So we all want the companies to perform well. So we essentially have to hire about 400 engineers in the first 2 quarters of the year. And so this is why I'm talking about that flexible model again. Like, my team haven't got capacity to do that. They can hire 400 engineers throughout 12 months, but they can't do it in 6 months. So bringing in, the Rec Hub team and getting some people on the ground to help us do that over the next 5-6 months to hit those goals is where we need to be. But I think, there's never free time in a recruiter. If you ask them, like, oh, what does your day look like? Well, I did 5 talent screens, I sent 50 outreaches, I caught up with this hiring manager, I looked at data reporting, closed an offer, it's that all week, right? They don't sit around, or they don't pop out at lunchtime and get their nails done, or whatever. They just don't have time. So I think in cases where there is a slowdown, or there is a change or a shift, there's so much work to do that you can't normally do. And yes, part of that is on the leadership team, and I'm lucky to have a really, really strong rec ops manager who's all over our data and tooling and things like this. But this is when we should be looking at how do we improve candidate experience? How do we make the hiring manager experience? How are we consistent in how we're reporting to the business? How do we look at automation and AI, and what tools are we actually using? Have we actually had time to play around with this new tool that we've bought or not? So this is when it really. This is why I constantly have a project roadmap. Sorry, and there's probably 12 projects on there. We only get 3 of them done because we're so busy. But then I want that roadmap, because what if there is change, and how do I show the team are busy, and how do I have measurable impact that I can say, okay, we're not hiring as many people, but these 3 recruiters are doing X, Y, and Z, and this is the impact of it. And as we dial back up again, this is how it's going to, this is what it's going to do for the business. So, yeah.
I think that roadmap idea is great because, like you say, you can show the rest of the business what your team is putting into the business during that, slow down period. So I suppose communication-wise, there's a very fine line in those uncertain times between keeping people informed and, I suppose, oversharing / causing any worry. So do you have any advice or tips on what do you do to keep people informed whilst maybe not sharing too much information? What does that look like? And obviously keeping them motivated during those times. What would you say about that? Rachel, do you want to take that one?
Um, I, I think you need to be honest and open. So any conversation you're having, that's the starting point. For me, I've always been, and I think it's really important to communicate in real time. So to your point, you as a leader will understand what you should be sharing and what you might want to hold back on, but it needs to be done in real time. And for example, in previous organisations where your business knows that a senior leadership meeting is happening on a Monday afternoon, I need to be communicating and doing that cascade piece to my team thereafter, because the worst thing is when people are hearing it from other parts of the organisation. That's not authentic. You're not leading by example. And quite frankly, I think it's the least that you can do. I think you can be really considered, really measured, honest, authentic, do it in real time and share what you can. But also, say to your team, this is what I can share with you. There might be other things in the offing that's not for this time and place just yet. And I think keeping it consistent. And if I kind of draw on an organisation that I've worked for previously, where there was a lot going on, like almost to the point of, between a Monday and a Friday, lots of things would happen. I just had a drop-in session on a Friday afternoon with my team. And it was as simple as I've set up a Teams meeting for 30 minutes. You're not obligated to attend, but if you want to, you can drop in and have a conversation and we'll just reconnect and, do what we need to do. But I would say keep it honest and do it in real time. Don't ever let your team hear from other parts of the organisation. And that spirals in itself as well.
Yeah, that can cause some upset in the team, can't it? Definitely. Cheryl?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Rachel said. I think for me, I'm a ever lasting optimist. So I think where there are times of change, having an office hours or an open Q&A where people can just come and ask questions, whether you want to. Some teams we use Slido because they would rather keep their questions anonymous. So giving them the option to do that as well can be good. And we actually have 2 Q&As happening per month. One is a people Q&A, which the people leadership team are on point to answer, and then one is off the back of our all hands, our company-wide all hands that we have. So we do have quite an open culture around asking questions, and it is, you can put your name to it or you can keep it anonymous, and there are some really great questions that get raised, some really challenging questions. But for me, going back to the optimistic piece, I think I always try to anchor on change is the one thing that is inevitable. Everything is going to change at some point. Nothing stays consistently the same. But with that, yes, there can be hard parts of it and there can be challenging parts of it, but there's always opportunity in it. And I just try to be super enthusiastic, and it's genuine because I really see the opportunities. I think, okay, well, look, this is happening. We're not going to be doing this anymore. We've got to change our way of thinking, but we can do this now, and this is great. I've wanted to do this for ages. So let's really focus on this. Let's not focus on, oh, well, we have to shift completely in direction. We've built these pipelines. We've wasted our time. We've got to start from the ground up, and let's just focus on, okay, we're hiring now AI people or something completely different that we've never done in the past. This is a new scope for us. This is an opportunity to learn. So I just try to always anchor on the positive side of change, and be enthusiastic about that, because that becomes quite viral and infectious, I think.
Are there any questions as we wrap up part 1 that you want to ask?
So I just had a quick question, because obviously we're talking a lot about scaling down, and you might agree or not, but it feels like sort of 2008 to 2020, building a strategy around flexing up and down was perhaps less of a concern for a TA leader, because we kind of had a 12-year good run, and TA functions were starting to mature, at least on this side of the pond. How much of an essential do you think it now is for TA leaders to sort of demonstrate that they have got strategies around flexibility in terms of TA functions' ability to deliver? And do you think that's now essential over the past 5 years?
So, in a nutshell, yes, I think it's essential. I think there's a bit in there, though, about the maturity of the organisation that you're working for. I've worked in organisations that have never really had a TA function until I arrived. That's a completely different conversation that you're having with your senior stakeholders to an organisation that, to your point, has had a TA function in place for 10, 15, 20 years. But I think every TA leader is thinking at this point in time, what could I do if any number of scenarios was thrown at me, and I would guarantee that flexibility would come into that conversation. I think it's something that we're talking about widely across the industry, across our networks, in terms of what it looks like. I think and probably the Rec Hub is, but well placed here to have a thought and a commentary on it. You're seeing the landscape shift in terms of talent solutions. So yes, we're sitting here having a conversation going, I need flexibility. I need to be able to scale up and scale down. And I know what that looks like. I know I'm going to have my permanent team. This is what the rest of it looks like. And I think in terms of those partners that maybe we traditionally went out to in 2008, 2015, 2020, unless they're moving with the times, and I don't think they are, you're just going to see that fall away.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my short answer is yes as well. And I think it actually expands beyond just TA. I think it's all parts, all aspects of the business. We have areas where we're hiring massive contractors because we want to keep headcount neutral. We have the budget. The budget isn't an issue. It's the headcount and the growth, and how our investors and our board, look at the size of the business and how much we're scaling. So we have mass contractors that we bring in for projects, or we outsource and work with, service companies and that side of things. So I think it goes across the business, but definitely impacts TA as well. I think there's a piece around what scale is the organisation at, and what stage is the company at. I think for startups, is probably they want 50% flexibility. For scale ups, maybe it's 20-30%. For large organizations, I mean, even Meta, where a large part of the team was laid off in TA, I think they had pretty, well, I don't know if Grace or Nelly can back me up on this one, but I think they made pretty decent payouts to people. But within 5 months, they were knocking on their doors saying, "Can you come back as a temp? Can you come back as a contractor? Because we need you back." And then converted some of those people to full-time employees again and stuff. So, even that they're doing it in a different way, but they're still having flexibility, and they're still doing it now with wave of layoff, bring more people back. I mean, it's not the nicest way of doing it. It certainly impacts employer brand, but yeah. So I think it depends what stage you are, how much flexibility you want. If I had a startup or joined a very small Series A startup, I'd probably go 90% flexibility. I'd want a couple of core, really solid recruiters, and then I'd bring in a whole team, just because you don't know how the business is going to go. Whereas when you're more stable, you're Series C, Series D, whatever, that's when you probably want that 20. You want the long-term scalability. You want to know that your team is able to deliver, but you just need that flex up. Yeah.
So, do you think that AI will play a part in strategically giving you that flexibility, scaling up or scaling down?
For me, not yet. I think it will at some point, but we're not there yet. And there's so many tools. We in my current role and previous role, where we were hiring across India and Africa in my previous role, the volume of applicants we received was unreal. You'd post a job and get 1,000 applicants overnight. And I've tried 3 or 4 different ranking AI solutions. Typically, the roles that we're hiring in those locations, it's not isolated to, but a lot of them are operational roles, particularly at Tide. It's member support, so it's basically contact center, member support, right? So they're on the phones. How do you rank a CV when you're looking for soft skills like customer service and communication? And candidates are using AI just as much. They're pumping into ChatGPT. Here's the job description, right? Tailor my CV and make it perfect to it. So these tools, they're great ideas and they will get there, but they're just not there yet. And I think there are business leaders out there who think you can do more with less with AI, and I just think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think maybe you can do more with the same. With AI, there are some really good productivity hacks, and just ChatGPT anyway. We use Gemini here. I still use ChatGPT. I prefer it. But there's so much. If I'm writing a strategic doc and I'm like, oh, I really want some data on this, like I want to benchmark something or whatever, it's a great tool. It does make you more productive, but it's not going to take away the transactional elements of a recruiter's role, and it's not going to help you magically build a pipeline of really niche talent with the click of a button. It's just not where it needs to be yet.
I wholeheartedly agree. It's not that I'm sitting on the fence about it either. I mean, I think if any one of us goes on to LinkedIn at the moment, you've basically got 2 camps when it comes to AI at the moment. Those that believe it's going to revolutionize the world and the talent acquisition landscape tomorrow. And those are like, I don't think so. And it's definitely not going to do it yet. And I'm not convinced that it's going to do it at a point in the future either. I do think that where AI is going to come in, to your point, it does some things brilliantly. I love nothing more than a bit of Claude and a bit of ChatGPT helping me. I can do more with my day. It's not giving me flexibility. It's not doing any of that strategic piece. And quite frankly, it's not going to find the right candidates. If I was going to kind of look into my crystal ball, where I think AI will come into its space in TA, is that it's probably going to take a lot of that front end of what we do. And those are the pieces that actually are quite easy to automate. Interview scheduling, let's just pick that as an example. I just can't see it ever taking away the human piece of TA and what we do. And to your point, I think we're in this world now where we've got candidates who are using AI for all parts of, I'm applying for a job, I've had my CV run through ChatGPT, but whatever it is, and then it's coming back at us, and then you're going to play another layer of AI on top of it to have an initial conversation. The point being, which is the conversation I'm having with business leaders, is we don't actually know who this person is. We don't know who they are. We have relied on technology to pick up some heavy lifting of this process. You told me in the job briefing that this was the person that you needed. You needed them to be, self-motivated, but we don't know. We've done half a process and we've wasted 2 weeks. And we don't know. So, not at this point, and remains to be seen.
We've had some great AI conversations on our podcast, so definitely check that out for some episodes there. Did you have a question?
My question was, do you think that as you mentioned, around candidate verification, challenges with AI interviewing, do you think you'll need to look at alternative models of assessment centers, psychometrics, bringing people into your office? What does that look like for you?
I think we've probably both got quite a bit to say on this. When COVID happened, I certainly remember as a TA leader, we suddenly went from having assessment centres in person to doing it all online. It didn't work very well. And so we kind of almost reverted back. Again, we're talking about the human element and impact of what we do across a process. The assessment piece, I think you could go down go down a rabbit hole with this, but yes, we will. I do think that there are things that organisations should be doing at this point in time. So, for example, if as an organisation you are starting to play AI into your process, candidates need to know that. That needs to be called out on your careers website when they're applying, for example. This is what we will use. And by the same measure, candidates should also be very clear when they're using AI in their application piece. So yes, I do think we will need to relook at it. But again, going back to an earlier point I made on the maturity of the organisation, you're going to have to kind of walk hand in hand with your business in terms of what you do and when you do it, because it depends on their adoption of AI. You know, there are companies that are doing far more than, for example, organizations that are just starting to think about it. So there will be that timeline that comes into play in terms of your company's maturity and appetite.
Yeah, for me, I've always been a fan of face-to-face interviews. I actually think you get a much better read on a person and they get to see your culture firsthand. They get to see the environment. They picture themselves physically being in that environment. So I am a big fan of that. Unfortunately, though, I just don't think it's reality going forward. Particularly here at Tide, we're remote first. We do have some roles where they're mandated to be in the office certain days a week because of language speaking requirements. So we have to make sure that we have certain amount of people on the phones that speak several different languages, etc. at a time, and we bring them all together. Excuse me, in the office. But we hire a lot of remote people, a lot of remote engineers. For example, we have about 65, 70 engineers in Serbia. We don't have an office there. They're all remote workers. So it's not physically possible for us to do that. And also there's a part where candidates don't actually want to do it either. They don't want to get up and what do they wear? Do they put a suit on or not? Are we going that far back? They don't want to get up and have to travel. They're not used to it, particularly within engineering here. So I don't think it's going to be possible for many organisations to change back to how it used to work. And I don't necessarily think we need to either. I think you can interview people and get a thorough assessment, and they can really understand the business and the role and the culture and what's important to them virtually. Where there is a challenge, and we've seen quite a lot of this, is cheating within the interview process, right? Dual screens, monitors set up. But there's some really good anti-plagiarism detection software out there. I used HackerRank at my last company, and it was brilliant at monitoring eye movements across screens, understanding, how the time, average number of seconds it should take to respond to something, and all of this kind of stuff. So I think there is, if you're finding people cheating at coding, code tests or code reviews, there's ways you can spot that. We actually had about 3 weeks ago a completely fake AI candidate that showed up to an interview and had a very traditional Lithuanian name and were apparently living in Vilnius. And the recruiter picked up on it straight away. She could tell that something on the screen, it wasn't moving correctly. It was a bit pixelated and a bit funny. And so she started to ask, what's your favorite restaurant in Vilnius? And it just literally, like, the bot just like a puff of steam came out of his ear. So I think with recruiters being aware and stuff, you can pick up on this. It can be pretty obvious. But when it gets to the point where it's not obvious anymore, this is where there's an opportunity, and somebody out there needs to build, if there isn't already, a really good tool to help detect that.
That is wild. So part 2 of our session today is about attracting and retaining the talent during those uncertain times. And we already touched on, in terms of retaining, communication and how important that is. And Cheryl, you mentioned that you've had teams where, the roles are reduced, but the team number has remained the same. Have you ever had any instances where the team has reduced, but the level of outputs remain the same?
We're kind of. So we're actually at that stage now where the team hasn't reduced at all, but we're not growing the team, and we need to do more next year. And I've talked about sort of flexible model and how we're giving ourselves more capacity. The simplest way of doing that is just increasing people's goals, but that is not motivating. It is not sustainable. You burn your team out, it doesn't. It works for a short time, but if you've got good people and you risk losing them, which you will see attrition if you do that, it's not healthy, and it's not the right way to go around it, and it will cost you more in the long run to replace those good people. So I think for me, what we're trying to do is really maximize productivity, and there's some basic things like, how are people structuring their week? Do they actually have focus time? Do they have sourcing time? Do they have days? I mean, it depends. Each recruiter kind of likes to work differently. Personally, I used to have 2 days where I just do almost, not quite back to back, but almost back to back screens when I was a recruiter. And then I wouldn't have any more screens the rest of the week. The rest of the week would be sourcing time. I'd have a couple of mornings just going really, really deep on sourcing. Then I'd have stakeholder meetings. Then I'd look at data and do my offers and close out the week and, close out some candidates and whatever. Are people structuring their time in that way, or are they just leaving their calendars open? They're jumping from sourcing to, oh God, I've got to screen someone. Oh, I must go and close that candidate. I've got to get this offer approved. I've got to do that. It doesn't work. So, that's just an easy way of automatically becoming more productive, just structuring your time in the right way so you don't have to put extra hours in. You're just using your time really, really intelligently. There are a lot of tools that we've got here, which are great. We use Good Time for scheduling, which also has Agent Plus, which is that inbound application ranking. We have Greenhouse ATS, which we're integrating with Workday, so our headcount management and workforce planning is becoming much more simplified, because it's basically off a budget spreadsheet at the moment that we have all of our headcount. So that will be a bit of a game changer for not only recruiting, but like people operations. It will automate the whole contract signing process and things like that. We've implemented Juicebox to help us with sourcing, because the prices of LinkedIn, we probably won't be able to afford an enterprise contract next year, and we'll be going to a la carte. So yeah, there's different tools and ways in which you can make the team more productive as well. But I think it comes back to communicating with them why it matters. If you're asking them to do a little bit more, why? What part of the business does that impact? So I gave the example earlier that we need to hire a year's worth of people in the first half within product and engineering. Our chief product and technology officer came and joined a meeting with the whole team and explained why this is so important. These are we call them speedboats, but these are the products that we're launching that we need to build. This is what it's going to do for our members. This is how much revenue it's going to generate. This is the budget that we've got. This is the target that we've got based on this. And this is why we need you guys. We need your help to make this happen, because if we don't make this happen, we're going to let down our members. We're not going to be able to build this whole suite of products that sit within the platform, and we're going to miss our revenue goals. And that really that motivated them far more than me saying, "Come on, guys, we can do this. Let's rally around. You've got each other." That was the biggest motivator. They really understood the mission and the purpose. So, yeah, that's a couple of ways in which I've tried to do that. Not exactly doing more with less, but more with the same.
I'm not sure I can add much more to that, but I'll give it a go. I've worked with organisations that have done the traditional, I'm just taking headcount away, we're not hiring, and then guess what? 6 months later, hiring numbers are back up to where they are, but you're expected to still maintain with the headcount that you've lost, and it's akin to trying to do the same job with one hand tied behind your back. you're not setting your team up for success. And I almost kind of relish those opportunities then to go and speak to the exec and show them a few data points. One of them tends to be agency spend, because suddenly when I've got a recruiter sitting with 50 to 60 recs instead of 20, guess what? They're not going to be directly sourcing. So I've seen it done really badly. And you don't really come back from that. You end up having to go out to market and hire again. However, just to kind of add on from what Cheryl was saying, that there is lots that can be done. And I have always said to my team, this is your opportunity. Aside from the pieces of work that we're going to do, this is your opportunity to go out and really understand and learn the parts of the business and get that depth of knowledge that you didn't have previously. And what I've always said to my teams as well is that as a TA leader, my hope is that for everyone that comes into my team, at a point where they decide to leave, they leave better than they were when they came in. They've got a breadth. We've worked together to understand their gap analysis. What is it that you want to learn? What is it that you don't have experience of that we can support you with? And that's then when you really start to have these wonderful, rounded 360 recruiters, and you'll then kind of find your superstars within your team. So, you'll have someone who is a tech guru, someone who's a data and analytics guru. And then, as I found in my previous organization, someone who's an absolute whiz at redesigning a careers website. Now, in previous organizations, we would go out and partner with someone to do that. Well, we did it ourselves, a little bit of learning on the job. And so I think you said it earlier, didn't you? There's always plenty to be doing in the TA space. And I think one of the really big education pieces for me when you're dealing with that top table is because everyone in an organization always knows how to recruit better than you do. I've never known a function where everyone goes, I can do your job, Rachel, and I can do it better. Let me tell you how I'd go out and find that person. And I've countered it with going, I really want you to understand what goes into delivering you a phenomenal pipeline, because it doesn't happen overnight. And certainly when I was a recruiter, I remember hiring people that I'd been having a conversation with over 18 months, because when I first approached them, they weren't ready to leave. And so that doesn't stop, regardless of whether your company is scaling up and down, you should still be having those conversations. And just to touch on employer branding very quickly, that's a really simple, cost-effective, authentic way to be going out there with your company's story, regardless of the challenges they've got or not.
That's it's like you knew what question I was going to ask you next. I wanted to touch on brand reputation and employer brand and those types of subjects. When if you have worked as you have for big companies where you might have information in the news or the press about how things are, how do you protect that brand reputation and still be able to attract candidates? Because you've still got roles, not all the roles stop, right? So you've still got some roles to hire. So how do you do that?
Great difficulty. I think the last few years we've seen a really interesting job landscape anyway, which has probably played into employers' laps quite nicely. And I think you touched on it, 1,000 applications overnight, dependent on where a role is located. I'm drawing on some recent experiences where, quite frankly, our brand was not good. And you only need to drop into Glassdoor and put an organisation in, and you can take a look and kind of, get a sense of what's going on in that organisation. I think it's, again, I'm going to go back, I sound like a stuck record, don't I? But it's about being honest and authentic. I think when you're having those conversations with candidates in the first instance, don't try and hide this stuff, because the world that we live in, information is readily available in a number of places. And it's not, candidates aren't just going on to Glassdoor and having a look. They're going into chat groups for specific products, for example, and running a search of, what's going on in this organisation. So I think you've just got to be upfront. But there's also opportunity within that difficulty. Yes, we're an organisation that's going, we're on a bumpy road at the moment. But this is the CEO's 5-year strategic vision, and we will get there. It's just not going to be easy. You've got to find the right candidate that's got the appetite for that. Every candidate is motivated by different things. So you've got to find the right one that wants to work with your organisation for where it's at now and where it's going in the future.
Cheryl, you said about approaching those difficulties with optimism and talking about, the plans. Is anything else that you would add?
I think the best way, I completely agree with the authenticity, right? That is so vital. You can't push out a fake employer brand. And I have worked for a company that did try to do that. And at face value, they look super cool. You only have to scratch the surface and you can see that it's not authentic. I think the best way to be authentic is employee advocacy, because people, if a company's going through a tough time, or if they're financially, they've made layoffs or whatever might be going on, the core employees that are there because they care and because they, not just because it's a job. I mean, yes, of course, we all at some point need to work and need to work to live, but we also have a choice. And there are opportunities out there, even TA leadership, which has been a tough market for the last few years. There's still good jobs for good people. So using your employees, it's free. Get them to write authentic stories. Get them to video themselves. We at Tide, we've got this incredible net zero achievement that we've hit, and we don't talk about it externally. But it's really important to some people. We have 3 volunteering days a year. We never showcase what our employees are doing on those volunteering days. We have paid sabbaticals and paid leaves, and we don't showcase it. So this is the first time I'm ever leading employer branding, and these are all things that I want to start to showcase and change. But I remember being at Facebook actually as an IC, as a recruiter, and speaking to a candidate who we wanted to come in and help the safety team, right? So there's terrible things that get put on the platform sometimes, and we needed people to help try to prevent that. And it was a really, really senior technical data science role. And the person, it was a lady that I was speaking to, and she was like, "I'm sorry, I just really." I can't, I hate social media. I'm really anti Facebook and I don't want to do it. And I said, that's exactly why we need you. Come and solve this. Help us. We don't want this either. Be part of the solution. Come and help us change. Make it a better, safer place, because it's not going anywhere. So come and be a part of that. So I think that's a really good angle as well. If there's something negative or something somebody doesn't like, or they've identified a bad reviews on Glassdoor, or the company's going through difficult changes, use that to your advantage where you can. Use it as an angle to say, well, come in and help us, because yes, we've made this mistake, or we're going in this direction. Be part of the solution. Help us fix it. And I've even done that with TA teams where I've been hiring, and the candidate said, listen, I haven't had the best candidate experience. I've been like, first of all, what? Who's your recruiter? Why? But second of all, okay, come and help us change that then. What would you have done differently? Why was it a bad experience? How would you treat candidates differently? What would you expect to have seen? We'll come in and help us do that. So yeah.
Last question from me today is about, I suppose, keeping candidates engaged. If you have had someone that wasn't successful on that time, or maybe their role got paused, how do you keep them, I suppose, active and engaged for future hires?
I feel like that that kind of wraps into that talent pipelining piece, and that that story and that conversation and that relationship that you build as a TA function. I think it's really important as well. There's a lot of education in the role that Cheryl and I do, and I found it in numerous organisations. Again, people think they know how to hire. Actually, as a leader, I need to be having those conversations with our C-suite and talking to them about what they need to do in these instances. You've had 3 brilliant candidates that have gone to final stage. We're proceeding with 1. We need to keep on having the conversation with the other 2, and that is that bigger pipeline piece. And like I mentioned, there are numerous instances where I, as a recruiter, but even now as a leader, have had conversations with people over a number of years. Timing wasn't right, they were unsuccessful, but I just think you need to, check in with them. Just keep on checking in, and dependent on how you like to work as a recruiter, you might need to remind yourself. Maybe your ATS does it for you. Maybe it's as simple as putting it in your Outlook. So I need to check in with this candidate. We know they're brilliant for this organization. They're just not brilliant right now, but there'll be an opportunity in the future. But it really needs to wind itself up into that talent pipelining piece that you do. And again, I think lots of people have different ideas about what talent pipelining is and what the activities are in it. And it comes back to maturity of an organization sometimes. Again, we're here to educate and really kind of start building that piece, because it is a fundamental pillar to what TA does. You mentioned earlier, what we do is not rocket science. You've got to get those pillars in place. But once you've got those pillars in place, that's when you get to do the magic over the top. And when you've got a really healthy talent pipeline, when you've been having those conversations with those candidates, that's where really it's very seamless. That's where you're able to pick up and respond and flex up and down, because you've already got that pipeline waiting for you.
To quickly add on that, I think the best recruiters or sources, it's very much a sourcer's role as well. They're really curators of talent, right? And yes, there's a part of those revisiting those candidates who maybe aren't right now, or there's the other part that you mentioned earlier around candidates that you've reached out to that they're not ready right now, but we can hire that person. You know that they will at some point be a great hire for your organization. You just got to wait for them. And so I think it's about timely communication. It's about not spamming them. So much of this AI, this automation piece is so fake and it's so obvious. I don't know if you guys have used the LinkedIn like AI. It's so obvious. When you were at this company, you did this. You just plucked that straight out of my LinkedIn profile. It's very, very obvious. So keep it authentic, keep it real. Hey, I'm just touching base. I know we spoke. You were interested in the company. Timing's not right. Where are you at now? But I think the revisits, that the reason that works so well, and actually again, Facebook did this beautifully. I think they had like 33% of hires there were revisits. It's because somebody has engaged with your business. They've come in, they've met the people that they could be working with. They've had a really positive experience, and it's crucial that they do have a good experience, that you provide feedback to them. I cannot bear it that when you don't get feedback off the back of an interview process. I understand for some high volume stuff and it's a shallow process. Maybe it's just a quick email, but pick up the phone and talk to your candidates or jump on a call or whatever. Speak to them and give them the feedback. Because with that, if they're engaged, they've enjoyed the experience, they've met super smart people that they really want to work with, the next time you reach out to them and 6 months, 12 months later, and you've given them feedback, I can guarantee they would have gone away and taken that feedback into action, and they would have worked on it. They would have brushed up or got more experience with React Native, or gone and worked on a project that helped them manage a larger scale budget, or whatever that piece of feedback was. So give the feedback, create the right experience, and then bring them back in. And I can guarantee they're not only engaged, but they also understand the process. So they know how to focus their preparation and research as well. And they'll ace it. They'll smash the interview process, and you'll hire them. And they'll be great as well.
I remember in my first ever recruitment job, I was told that candidates are 13 times more likely to complain about your organization when they've had a bad experience. Now, whether it's 13 times or, yeah, I mean, the number's kind of irrelevant almost to a point. It's the fact that if they've had a bad experience, they're going to tell far more people than kind of walking out and just going, I didn't get the job, but I had a great experience and so on. So I just always kind of remember that.
I remember interviewing at Lego about, I don't know, 3 years ago. And it was for head of TA for tech, and I didn't get the job. I was one of 2 finalists, and the other person, who I think hopefully went on and did a great job, they got the role, and I was gutted. And they even sent me, after the process, this Lego bonsai tree, which was awesome. I absolutely love Lego. It's one of the things I do with my son. But I was so gutted because it was such a brilliant interview process, and it really pushed and challenged me. And I worked, really invested in this presentation. And I was like, oh, please, just everything crossed. And I didn't get it, and I was gutted. But if anyone, I've had so many people reach out to me and say, what's a company you'd love to work for? Lego. Hands down, I will say Lego, because I know reputationally they're a brilliant organisation. I'm still gutted, and I hope one day they call me back. I'm very happy at Tide. One day in 5 years. But no, if I ever saw a role there and I happened to be in the market, I would go for it again because of that lasting impression, that experience.
Ray, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks. We've all seen a massive increase in candidate applications, and we're talking about attraction. What do we do with those candidates that don't get the job? The feedback, the 80% that probably should never apply in the first place. What are we doing for them? How are we managing their experience through this process?
This is where a good CRM is really, really important. And actually, it's a hard thing to crack. We're not doing it very well here at Tide at the moment. At Bolton, my previous role, I implemented a tool called GEM, which is fantastic. It's one of the best CRMs I've ever worked with. It has automated outreaches that you can set to run over like an 18-month period. Like you said, you remembered hiring someone that you spoke to 18 months ago. It's a really, really good CRM. It allows you to organize and structure your candidates how you want to. The engagement there is fully automated, but authentic. It's not AI driven, or it's kind of your messaging, your sequencing that you build. I think most ATSs now do have really good CRMs. We just haven't activated the Greenhouse one very well, and this is one of our big, I talked about that project roadmap. This is a big project for us in the next 6 months.
A lot of candidates say on Glassdoor and Reddit and things like that is that, basically black hole, I've made an application, heard nothing. And you're talking about authenticity and feedback to candidates. Well, one of the things that I think AI can actually add value to is a candidate that possibly was never really likely to get a job. Yeah. Okay, let's say, and that's probably about 80% of the people that actually apply. Could AI actually, advise them, firstly, on that point? That there's a fire alarm, Cameron? There's a fire test? Thank you.
Thank you for your cooperation.
You're welcome. So, kind of acknowledge the fact that thank you very much for your application, you weren't right for this time, but actually these are the things that you could be doing further down the line, all right? This is an AI message, but this is actually some value add to you as a candidate. Thank you very much for applying to Tide. For argument's sake, come back in a year's time if you've got this kind of experience. Okay, so it's not an individual calling them, but actually what they're getting is some feedback. They're hearing back from the organisation, and there's some value being delivered to them as an individual. In my view, in 2 years' time, people won't care whether or not they're speaking to an individual, as long as they're getting an opportunity to have their say. So that's kind of AI's got a place, but I think it's where it's used. I think people really aren't thinking too much further about that at the moment.
I don't disagree with that, and I think I made that comment earlier about I see AI coming into that front end at the top. Yeah, and I think it's definitely got a place. I'd go one step further back, if I may. When you're having a conversation and taking a briefing with your hiring manager, you are going to have, within the realms of that conversation, you're going to understand what candidates' skill sets, for example, we're not looking for. And I think there are plenty of organisations out there that have just applied a blanket, well, this is the process. We've raised a requisition in the system, we'll post it out to LinkedIn, jobs boards and so on. Think about what it is, because what we should actually be doing is taking a look at the questions that we ask as an organisation and going, are they in depth enough for this particular role? For example, the person that does this role needs to be in our London office 3 days a week. Right, well then why have we just gone out with a commitment to we embrace hybrid working, so and so and so and so, and then you've got a bunch of candidates in the funnel just gone, I'm not going to work 3 days a week in the office. Well, we could have done that if we'd asked the right questions and actually posted the role properly. So I think there's some basic housekeeping as well that we need to be quite mindful of.
Thank you, Rachel and Cheryl, for today. You've been amazing. I think everyone will agree. Cheryl, thank you so much for letting us. Thank you. Thank you for letting us gatecrash your office. It's been amazing. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please do make sure you take a topple mug with you, take your notepad with you. And if you have any questions, I think you'll be around for maybe 5-10 minutes, but we have overrun. So then hopefully everyone has a lovely weekend. Thank you, everyone.